How's it going, my friend? It's Danny here from projectmanaverse.com, real world technical project management for beginners. And in this video, I'm going to talk about 3 common mistakes when it comes to using your decision log as a project manager. So first of all, what is a decisions log? Well, as you go through your project and you go through the project lifecycle, there'll be a number of very key decisions that will need to be made. And these decisions are very key because they will impact the course or direction the project will go in one way or another. So they have a big impact, they're very important, so they need to be made by the right people, the right stakeholders. And because these decisions are so important, we need to get them recorded and documented. And that's where the decision log comes in. So all those key decisions that will usually be made in some kind of governance forum, be it a steering group or a project working group, and you'll have to have the right people on that call to make that decision. And if it's made, everyone's in agreement, it gets recorded, and then you've got it there to ensure you've complied with the project governance, and you've got it as an audit trail as well. So that's what the decision log is, quite important. And why is it important? Well, the decision log is there for a control. It's a control to protect you, it's a control to protect the project, and a control to protect the customers as well, because these big decisions can't be made by anyone. You can't make them yourself as a project manager, or you shouldn't be anyway, because if you make the wrong one, you could end up causing a train wreck with the project. It could result in expenditure, millions of pounds of cost, or you could be in breach of some kind of regulation. So we need to make sure that the right control is around these big decisions and they're not being made by anyone. So it's really important there. It's a good idea, and it is quite valuable to have it in place and have one being used on a project. So it's worth taking it seriously as a project manager. Also, a little hidden benefit as a project manager, if you have a decisions log, it will save you a lot of time on your project, because if you don't have one, even for the smaller things, then you can often waste time trying to remember what was agreed, or arguing with stakeholders about who said what and what was decided, going back to trying to find evidence of the conversation, old emails, and you can waste a lot of time revisiting old grounds, revisiting old arguments, and basically repeating time and effort that could have been avoided if you had just kept a record of that key decision. So it is quite important. Okay, so that's the background. So let's go into the common mistakes that I see when project managers use a decision log, and I'm going to talk about 3. Now, the first big mistake is that they're only used for the big decisions. So if you use them for the big decisions, that's great, that's what you want, and that will give you a lot of protection in terms of things going wrong fundamentally. But you also want to use them for the slightly smaller decisions that won't necessarily change the entire direction of the project, but will still have a big impact on certain areas. So things like getting requirements signed off, or big decisions around the design that you're doing, decisions around what kind of testing you want to include in the project. Smaller things that are not so massive but are still going to have an impact on the project should be recorded as well. And you might not have to do it as part of that governance. Usually that governance will stipulate you have to keep a record of those big decisions, but they won't stipulate you have to keep a record of every single decision on the project, because that would be too much of an overhead. But you as a project manager, you can keep your own little personal decision log in an Excel template. That's what I do, and get into the habit of just kind of reviewing it now and then. And if you're going through your project, you're in a key meeting and you realize you're making a decision with a group of stakeholders, just get it down there as well. So that's common mistake number 1. And again, the benefit of doing that is it saves time for those arguments later on, especially when the stakeholders are more at a lower level. They're not like right at the executive level, but they're still important stakeholders. Could be some business stakeholders or some IT stakeholders. You've got together in a meeting and you've made a key decision about the design of the thing you're building, for example. If you don't include everyone, or you kind of forget what was said and you don't have it written down where that decision was made, then that can cause you some time and hassle and headache without that decision log. So it's worth doing. So that's common mistake number 1. The log is only used for big decisions and not smaller decisions. Common mistake number 2 is it's just not considered important as a project manager to use a decision log. And I see this one quite a lot. Now, to be honest, not a lot of project managers really are in the habit of using their own decision log. They'll just maybe keep document of those really big decisions that is necessary for the wider project governance and that mandated project governance. But this is a real bonus one. So if you can get into the habit of doing it, it puts you head and shoulders above other PMs, because I don't see many PMs doing this, and it's just not taken seriously enough. Usually because there just isn't time, or there is time, but it's not considered urgent. So we tend to put it down the list on things to do. So yeah, if you can get into the habit of doing this, what I like to do is try and do it every day or every other day. Just at the end of the day, I'll think about, right, I'll look through my meetings and think, right, did we make any key decisions today? Not necessarily huge ones that have to be channeled through that steering group or that high level governance, but just more localized ones. And if there were any, I'll quickly open up my Excel spreadsheet. I'll just make a note of it and it's done, basically. So get into the habit of doing that every few days, like clockwork, and then you won't forget and you'll get into a nice routine of it. So it's a good little tip. Okay, the last common mistake I see when using a decision log is, sorry, I lost my notes there. Yeah, it's not, people don't link enough evidence to the decision. So it's fine to document the decision, but what you want to do is actually keep some kind of evidence of what was made, be it a meeting recording or transcript, which is a great way of doing it. If you've got Teams or some kind of software these days that does a meeting transcript, if you can get an extract of that and attach it to the decision, then you've got the real proof. It will even say sometimes who is actually speaking in the transcript. That's really good evidence. If you can get that transcript, just export it, attach it to your decision log, or link to it at least. That's a good way of doing it. That's a really good way of doing it. At the very least, you want to write down the time of the meeting and the date of the meeting, who was in it. And if you can, if you're sending out minutes of that meeting, obviously in those minutes, you're going to have that key decision in there. So if you can just attach that email, or again, link to the email, that's better than nothing. But ideally, if you can get like the transcript itself, because you've got all the stakeholders, their names, exactly what was said and who agreed to it, then you can, that's the ideal way of doing it. But at the very least, just get their time of the meeting and the date of the meeting and the minutes of the meeting. At the very least, if you can't get the minutes, just at least get the time itself and the date, because if you get into any disputes with these stakeholders later down the line, you can at least say, look guys, we agreed to do this on the 27th of August at 10 o'clock on this meeting, and you can show in the meeting, and that will probably ring some bells, and they'll remember what was actually said. So those are the three common mistakes. Let me just recap on those. Number one, the decision log is only used for the big decisions and not the smaller decisions. So if you get into the habit of keeping your own personal log just for those smaller decisions, it will really, really help you and save you time down the line. Number two, it's not taken seriously enough by project managers. They don't keep their own project decision log. So if you can do it, it puts you head and shoulders above other project managers in terms of that, making time for that core bread and butter responsibility of a project manager and doing things properly and making sure that the right control is there. Remember, as a project management, you're there as a control over the project to make sure things are done right, and you're de-risking the project by having this mini decision log. And again, you'll save yourself a lot of time, and you'll look very professional too. You'll look shit hot if you can say, guys, look, let's stop arguing. I know what was agreed because I've got it in my decision log that was made at this date, at this time. You were in the meeting. I've got the evidence here. So let's put a stop to it and move on. And the last common mistake of the decision log was not linking to enough evidence. And again, the best way of doing it is actually getting the transcript of the meeting as well, because you'll have who was on the meeting, exactly what was said, and you can't really argue back to that. Okay, so that's the video. I'm going to wrap up there. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this one, hit that subscribe button. And until tomorrow, please take care.